Welcome to Mental Health Breakthroughs for Young Adults and Families. I'm your host, Carey Conley. This podcast is dedicated to helping young adults navigate through the challenges and learning curves that they're experiencing in every area of life. My personal episodes will be dedicated to helping you with getting clarity, direction, moving through adversity, and living with purpose and hope. I will also be bringing you amazing guests to discuss topics such as finances, career choices, relationships, grief, addiction, positive mindset, mental health, and more. I am on a mission to help you live a life that you love and have the confidence to go after your dreams. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Mental Health Breakthroughs for Young Adults and Families. I am taking the time this month, in the month of September, to bring on guests that have been impacted by suicide somewhere in their life because it is Suicide Prevention Month. Whether they've been physically, have lost a family member or friend to this epidemic, or they are making it their life's work to change the trajectory of this disease. And it's been interesting to have the people on that I've had. And so I'm super excited to have somebody very special to me on with me today. This is my daughter, Laurel. So I'm introducing you to the world now on this podcast, Laurel. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely. I would say we know each other pretty well.
Yeah, I think so.
So questions for me?
What's that?
You don't have a bunch of get to know me questions?
Yeah, tell us your whole life story, Laurel. But I will tell you that actually, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about what's happened in your life. But the reason Laurel is on here today, for those of you who don't know, is we have lost two of our families over the past 10 years to suicide. My husband, her dad, 10 years ago, and then my 25-year-old son, Laurel's brother, 7 years ago. And when we went through all of that, about a year after losing Cole, my son, we decided to co-author a book together. This is our book. It's called Keep Looking Up. And we decided to write the book not just to tell our story, which we do a little bit in the book, but it's 11 chapters that we wrote on what helped us through this process. Because so many people, because we've been so public with our story, would come to us and say, hey, I'm really struggling with something and I don't know what to do. I'm going through grief of my own, or most especially, we had a lot of people say, I've got somebody who's really struggling and I don't know what to do. How can I help them? Mm-hmm. So that's the purpose of the book. And so I thought we would take some time today to just shed some light on a few of the chapters and some of the questions that are in the book and see if we can help some people going through their own journey. So Laurel, tell these guys what your life is like right now.
Well, if I could paint a picture of my house at the moment, I have a tent with a tube set up and I have toys everywhere. But yeah, I'm very much in the season of motherhood with small kids. So if anybody's listening, it's like, oh yeah, I've been there, which is a blessing. Outside of us sharing our story whenever we get the chance, my husband, Ethan, and I own a real estate business. So I get to work alongside him in as much capacity as I can. But for the most part, I'm home with my two very wild boys. 4 and 18 months. And I'm super thankful for that. It's long days and short years, as they say. So yeah, that's definitely the world I'm in. I was in weddings for a long time, but I walked away from that after having kids because that's obviously not a very normal schedule. So it is keeping up with the crazy boys at the moment.
Yeah, I can attest to Laurel's life. Have been a big part of those grandsons of mine, and it's just such a blessing. And it's such a blessing that it happened when it did, because it was a year after losing Cole that Laurel got married. And then a year later, finding out she was pregnant. And, it's just messages from our angels that they are still with us and sending us a lot of joy in Laurel's family, those two boys, right? So we've done a lot together throughout the years, and especially we've drawn very, very close through losing these men in our life. And just want to continue to just keep bringing purpose and hope to people. Mm-hmm. And I thought we would start with some of the chapters that you and I both love the most, Laurel, that we think has helped people the most. Mm-hmm. And so I thought we would start with talking about the chapter on preparing for impact, mm-hmm. mustering your super safe people. So I'll lead off by saying, one of the things that Laurel and I learned let's talk about losing my husband first, because it was such a shock. We never saw it coming. We've never had to handle anything to this magnitude in our life before, that we learned a lot. And what we learned most especially was how to work with the people around us that were trying to help us, but didn't know how. And the biggest thing I think we learned is that a lot of times people want to help you in the way that they would want to be helped.
Yeah.
And some of those things were not very helpful for us. And so we learned the second time around when we lost my son to make sure that the only people we were bringing into this journey at that moment were the people we knew were safe. Safe from a standpoint of understanding our needs and not their own, understanding how much or how little help we would need. Laurel tells a story about her best friend and you guys going off to Target. You want to share that story, Laurel, as an example?
Well, I was going to say too, it's perfect timing of us going through this book because, that class that I randomly got asked to facilitate, which we, can dive deeper into really after launching this book, just a lot of different experiences. I say coming out of nowhere, but we definitely know where they came from, like very much God-driven opportunities. But I just started diving in, and that was one of the stories I shared. But I talked about it in the book that I learned, and I think it was after Cole had passed. So I kind of was aware of how I liked to grieve, I guess is the best way to put it, and just not being a very touchy-feely person. And my childhood best friend, who's still my best friend to this day, she's really like me though too. So I think it works out well where she just kind of sat there and like we didn't touch each other and didn't embrace, and I needed that. And then she was like, "Do you want to go to Target?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And so we went and we just like bought, I don't even know, I couldn't even tell you what we bought. I have no idea. But I remember spending like $250 on just like random stuff. And it was nice because I was in a space where like nobody had any idea what had just happened to me, because it was just that continuous flow of people in and out of like looking at you a certain way and feeling bad for you and wanting to talk. And so we went to Target and it was like nobody knew. We could just buy random stuff and it felt like we were in high school again. And I don't think at the time she realized how impactful that was for me. But I just needed to do something so simple and mindless. So it was very, very refreshing. Again, I have no idea what we bought. Apparently it was fun.
Well, but this is the thing, and I'm going to go back to saying what I said a minute ago. A lot of times when they're trying to help somebody through grief, they do the things that they would want for themselves, but it's not necessarily what you need. And so I think the biggest piece of advice we can give here, and I've said this before, is to mirror what you see them exemplifying to you that they need. So I'll use an example of when my husband passed. We were in a neighborhood where, had a lot of really great neighbors and a lot of people who went to our church in the same neighborhood. And the very first thing they all wanted to do was to come to the house with food. And I begged them, please don't start coming with a lot of food. Because then you end up with all this food and all these plates that you've got to give back. And, we just, like Laurel said, we were in such shock that we didn't want anybody around until we could like manage how we were actually doing and what we needed, because we really didn't know. But God love them. They brought the food anyway. Yeah. And there are those friends, like Laurel said, she's not a real touchy-feely kind of person, does not like to be hugged. And there are people that just want to sit in a circle and hug on each other and cry on each other and the whole thing. And that happened at the memorial service of my husband. And Laurel literally almost had a panic attack from all the embracing. There was, over 200 people there. It was just too much. So we learned that it was okay for us to have boundaries. It was okay for us to verbalize those boundaries and who those people were that were going to respect the boundaries, not just short term, but long term with us. And I think that's another big thing we learned, is a lot of grace and mercy around understanding that there were just some people that were not going to be along for the long haul. Yeah.
I like the saying of, when people show you their true colors, believe them. Where, I always want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I always want to think that people have their best intentions. But I do think when a certain somebody shows up in the same way over and over and over, or doesn't respect a boundary, or just really isn't hearing you in that situation, you have to believe that isn't necessarily going to change. And we say this all the time, that this doesn't make somebody a bad person just because they didn't know or they weren't aware or whatever. Like the other
Right.
chapter, grace and mercy, but it also doesn't mean that you have to keep allowing it. That's the difference. It's not to
Right.
say that you have to have this, massive conversation, unless it is a situation where you maybe do need to say something. But if somebody's going to continually cross those boundaries and you just don't have the energy to keep dealing with that. And so it's a hard thing to learn, especially when it came to, sometimes some family members, other people that have been with us for a long time. And then, what's crazy is that when I felt like I did release some people from my life, and maybe not 100% out of my life, but released it from being in my inner circle of energy, God started bringing other people into my world that filled that space in a better way. Because especially losing one person and then losing another, I didn't want to let go of friends, especially being really early out of college. I was like, well, I don't want to lose more people, quote unquote, lose people in my life, but I needed to release them so that I could have better people come in. But that's hard to do. You think you're going to be lonely and missing out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but the other people are waiting to come in because they need that space.
Yeah. And it is a hard thing because we know that they loved us. And we know that if you're listening to this and you're trying to help somebody through this and you're kind of questioning, am I going to be a safe person for somebody? Am I going to be the one that really helps them the way they want to be helped, that will mirror what they need and won't be a drain? That's the other thing is when you go through something like this, or you've lost somebody, or somebody who's lost somebody, it's really, you need to be the person that's giving them energy, and then instead of them having to give you energy. A lot of what happened for Laurel and I is that so many people were also grieving the loss and were needing our energy to get through it. And we just couldn't do it. So I think we lost a lot of people that way too. But again, like Laurel's saying, we just learned that they just don't know what they don't know. And we just moved on. And that's what you have to do.
And I wanted to share two things that I shared with somebody recently that was helpful for me. And I was told this by other people, so I can't take credit for this. But a lot of times when somebody's going through a loss, they say, let me know if I can help you, or what's something I can do to help. You have no energy to even think of a way to have that person help you. Or when somebody is venting, we naturally as humans, I think, give advice, even if it's not necessarily wanted in that moment. And so it was two questions that I told somebody that had lost a family friend to suicide like 2 weeks ago, I believe it was. I said to her, here's two things that could be helpful. I want you to come up with two very concrete ways that you are willing to offer help. Like, hey, can I place a grocery order for you? Or can I come mow your lawn? Which one would be more helpful? That person has to just think the mowing the lawn would be great. It's like a simple, they don't have to think about, oh, well, you could help me with X, Y, and Z. You're giving ways that you feel like they could use help, black and white, right? And then the other one was, I said, if that person starts venting to you, say, hey, in this moment, are you needing me to just listen, or do you want me to give some advice? Because a lot of times people are like, oh, I actually do really want you to give me some advice on this, which is great. Then you can offer it, because I catch myself too, where I'll, start giving it. And I'm like, maybe that person didn't want that right then. They just wanted to get it all out. And so sometimes it's simply just rewording how you say something to somebody. Again, when you don't have the energy, it releases that off of you. Because it was exhausting. Yeah. People are like, how can I help you? And I'm like, I don't even know how to help myself right now.
Right. Yeah. So good. And these are just things, like we're saying, that you might be going through something right now that you could apply this to. Or, so for example, in the book, so what we love about the book is that we have a topic, and I give my perspective and Laurel gives hers. And at the end, we have questions that you can use. And so with this mustering your super safe people, there's questions in the back that you can ask yourself as, consider the people in your life for whom you would be a super safe person. Ask a grieving person to help you understand what he or she needs the most. Does that person need to cry it out or not cry it out? So just really good reflective, things that you can do proactively. And mustering those super safe people and knowing who they are right now will help a lot. So the other chapter I picked out to talk about, Laurel, and I'm going to, again, lead this off and then have you talk a little bit more about it, is establishing a new identity. So the blessing and the curse when you go through some sort of trauma or loss is that your identity, the roles that you had shift, and you get face to face with who you really are and who you really want to become. For example, my role had been wife, mother, all the things. And, in a short span of time, those roles shifted. And it really made me look at, okay, well, who am I without that? And it really is a journey of reflection, of asking yourself questions like, all right, what am I really supposed to be doing with what I have left here on this earth? And for me, what happened was, a lot of people don't know this. They think that I started doing my vision work after we lost Ross and Cole. And the truth is, I've been talking about this for unofficially over 30 years. And officially almost 13 years now, way before we lost my husband and son. What happened when I lost them is my purpose now just got 10x'd. Now I understand why I have this calling to carry out. And so I want you guys to really understand that when you go through some sort of adversity, you're not going to be the same. And if you have somebody that's gone through this, like I even said this, I think in the book, somebody told me very shortly after my husband died that I was not going to be the same person. And they were prepared for that. They knew that I was going to change. And so it's hard because those roles run long and deep, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on that, Laurel?
Well, I was in a very different situation because I didn't have these long lasting identities already. I was in college when Dad passed, and then 1 year out of college when Cole passed, and I wasn't married yet. I didn't have my own kids. So I didn't have any quote unquote like deep identities. And so I almost had to go about it where when I started having those identities of getting married, having the boys, when I was in the wedding industry, whatever, I had to cross a bridge each time of when do I want to allow this part of my identity to cross over with this new phase of life. And what I mean by that is I can't think of any times when I was working in the wedding industry that anybody knew what I had gone through. And it wasn't like I purposely hid it. It just didn't make sense for that to really be a part of my identity because it was a very professional setting and I didn't have, beyond a couple of my coworkers maybe, but, clients I worked with per se. But now every time that I cross a new bridge where, I started a new Bible study about a year ago, it wasn't until about a month or two in did I feel like it was an appropriate time to share what I had been through. Because then, yes, it becomes very much an identity piece. And I was prepared for that, but for a little while, I didn't necessarily want that to be right away what I was known for. Right. It was a setting where everyone was sharing about their families and their life. And I just kind of took a little time where I was like, I kind of want to get to know these people more before I'm known as, the person that's lost 2 people by suicide, because it really does become very much a mark. And there's times where I don't really want that to be my identity, but from that Bible study, I've now had situations where some of those girls have gone through it with family members in the last year, and they were able to come to me and talk to me. So I'm like, I have to be prepared to know that that's what's going to come of it. But there have been times that I've kind of kept it at bay for a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
We definitely went through that.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said just to be known for other things first before that sometimes.
Absolutely. And that was really hard in the beginning, most especially right after my husband died and word got out like wildfire. It became, I tell people it was almost to the point where I couldn't even walk through the neighborhood or go to the grocery store because I would see all my friends.
Yeah.
And the first thing I would get was that look of, oh my gosh. Right. Mm-hmm. So give people a lot of grace and mercy, you guys. If they've gone through something, they're going to have some shifts in their identity and they need a lot of room to grow. And a lot of changes happen. Mm-hmm. So the last chapter, Laurel, I'm going to have you head up talking about our favorite chapter at the end.
Yeah.
Our perspective and why we call this book Keep Looking Up.
So the last chapter we wanted to do, which we did 11 chapters. I don't think we said this at the beginning, but 11 chapters because my brother was born on 11/11. And for a lot of people, 11 in general, and then 11/11 together is like an angel number, if you will, or people wish on that, or, so we feel like there's a lot of significance in that. But the last chapter is called Finding Heaven on Earth. And it's not necessarily meant for this to be like a religious book, if you will, but for us, it was everything to get through and continue to get through what we've gone through. And so there was no denying that we couldn't include this. But some of the things that I highlighted that I shared with this class that I facilitated, which to share a little briefly about the class, it's a group of survivors of suicide. So everyone in that class has lost somebody to suicide, and I facilitated it a week or so ago. But the beginning of the chapter says people often have a vague perception of what heaven is. However, there are signs everywhere we are already living within heaven. God is in everything we experience with our senses every day. And so one of the stories that I shared was one of the signs that you received. So I'll read a brief little snippet of that one. Make sure I don't lose my spot on here. Let me go to this part. So it says, one Christmas after Cole's death, Laurel had a pillow made for me out of one of my favorite his favorite tennis shirts. The woman who made the pillow said she felt someone's hand on her shoulder while she was working on it, and she heard a clear message. Everything is good, and everything will make sense when you're on the other side. Nothing is without purpose. I'm sorry for all of the sorrow I caused you. Life is worth living. She also sensed that Cole was telling her exactly how he wanted the pillow to be made. She felt his presence the entire time. Laurel had no idea this would happen. She simply thought the pillow would be a great gift for me. And what's pretty wild is that the woman I had make the pillow doesn't speak English very well. She's Costa Rican. And so the fact that she heard that message, and she had shared that she had experienced other things like this with other people that had passed, but just a crazy story. And we've experienced so many different situations where different signs have come through, especially music for both of us. But it was just such a reminder that when people always ask us, how did you get through this? Or how are you still getting through this? The answer is always having faith that we're all going to end up together. And we always say, we're like, we don't know how anybody gets through anything without that, because that's that eternal promise, right?
Yes. Yeah, that is what has kept Laurel and I going the most, is that we get signs all the time, usually very random signs. And we just have a very deep faith. And I think, again, one of the blessings and the curse out of this whole thing is that we've grown much, much closer to God, and our faith, our relationship, and just know that we feel very solid about our eternity. And if you don't know that, I hope that you would reach out to one of us and ask us about that, because that's the anchor through everything, right? So the people around us have helped a lot. Laura and I's relationship is, we've given each other a lot of grace and mercy, because we've, things have changed and life has gone different. Laurel's given me has having to give me much more grace and mercy, because I'm getting old and crazy.
Crazy, as we say.
So, just make sure, you all, that if you're going through a tough time, that you have the right people around you. Do not be concerned at all that if you have to put down some boundaries for yourself, that you're going to lose some people. You might, but like Laurel said, it just opens up space for the right people to come along and be assistance to you. And if you're trying to help with somebody someone going through something, be that person, be the safe person for them, and in for the long haul, not just for right now. We talked a lot about grieving, how we're always going to be grieving, but how we use the grief for good. And that, again, our heavenly perspective is what's getting us through, which is why we call the book Keep Looking Up. So anything else you want to share, Laurel, about where we're at in the journey?
I mean, I talk a lot about, when I speak individually, talking a lot about perspective. One of my neighbors, after we moved just a couple months ago, she and I have gotten really close, and I told her fairly early because it's in my Instagram bio about the book. And so she asked me right away what it's about. And I told her, and she looked at me, she was like, if you would have never told me, I would have had no idea that you've gone through what you've gone through. And I was like, well, what do you mean? So we just always seem so positive. And I told her, I said, what other option do I have? And I told her, I said, it's very clear to me. And I didn't feel this necessarily when Dad died. So I'll be clear about that. I think I fell way further into the confusion and the anger. And I think it might've been being 20 years old and just a lot else going on. But then when Cole passed away, I remember feeling so deeply that I was like, I don't have an option but to go in a different direction this time, or it's going to overcome me 100%. And that's easier said than done. I mean, it's a daily choice. It's not like, you just wake up one day and like, oh, this is all great. But I just told her, I was like, every person has a choice. We don't have a choice of what happens to us. We have zero control. If anybody knew that, we have zero control of what happens to us. Our only control is how we react to it. And so it's one of those choices every day of waking up of how your perspective is going to be, your attitude's going to be, how you're going to move forward. And again, easier said than done, but I think having faith helps with that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And each other. The theme out of all my podcasts recently has been how much more as humans we need to be connected to each other, how much we have disconnected from each other, and what that is doing to our mental health. So I just think that we just need to go back to what I said earlier. We need to give each other a lot more kindness, a lot more grace and mercy, a lot more compassion, because the truth is we've all got a story and we're all just trying to get through it. And I'm hoping that if you are listening today, that if you're going through something, that this is giving you some sort of hope, and that you understand that there's always a promise of a better day. So I want to thank you. Thank you, Laurel, for being on with me today. Love it.
Back to my crazy voice.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode. I'm here to remind you to keep looking up.
Design the life you've always dreamed of with Viva. Vision is Victory Academy. Join us and discover how to transform your vision into victory. Whether you're seeking clarity, resilience, or a path to personal growth, Viva is here to guide you every step of the way. Don't wait for life to happen to you. Make it happen with Viva. Sign up today at visionisvictoryacademy.com and take the first steps towards a life of purpose and passion. Your future self will thank you.